Hi and welcome to Jamie's house. Today we're going to be making a one-pot meal. I promise you it's going to be simple, it's going to be fast, and it's going to be delicious. This is traditional southern ingredients that we're using today. We're going to be using some turnip roots, turnip greens, some smoked pork. It could be bacon, it could be ham, which today we're using this as a smoked picnic shoulder. Anyway, any kind of like smoked meat. Sometimes I even use sausage. We have an onion and some black-eyed peas. And then for the filler, instead of typically a meal like this will be served with cornbread, but instead of doing cornbread, we're going to be doing a dumpling, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But for right now, let's just dive in and get this going. So when I was growing up, Mom always, I forgot to mention, some sort of, I use a ham flavored base in mine. I don't always use it, but for this particular recipe today, we are going to use this. And I was going to mention to you, or I was just saying that Mom always had the food pyramid posted right by were told to eat by that food pyramid. So if you do that, all of you know you're going to end up with a starch and vegetables and a protein, and you end up with a lot of pots. And when I first went away to college, I was trying to learn how to cook for myself. I quickly discovered that I didn't like washing dishes. Not in the slightest that I like washing dishes. So, and I mean, I had to wash dishes before growing up, but when you're living by yourself and it really just all falls to you, that was sort of insurmountable for me to have to think about. So I started trying to figure out, well, how do I cook everything in one pot so I don't make dishes? And that's sort of where this particular recipe, or this version of this recipe that I'm doing, was born. I basically out of laziness, and since I've gotten older, I've come to realize that sometimes what I may have called laziness really isn't laziness as much as it is being thoughtful and being sort of like purposeful, and instead of a negative thing, it can be perceived as something more positive. But anyway, Mom had always made chicken and dumplings, and unlike what a lot of people call dumplings, which we call pastry, we always associated dumplings with being cornbread or cornmeal. And the ones that she would make were really like bricks. I mean, I loved them growing up, but they were heavy because they were essentially just all cornmeal and water. And here in the South, in this part of North Carolina, well, I'm actually in South Carolina, but I grew up in North Carolina, and the cornmeal that we used, it's a specific type of corn that essentially you can just add water to it and it'll stick. You don't need a binder. And the way I grew up, we never added binders. We didn't typically add things like eggs or milk or any kind of like fat or anything like that. So those dumplings that Mom made would be heavy. They were like bricks in the pot. And they were always delicious, but I always had thought, man, there's got to be a way to make those dumplings lighter. And I started researching some, going through cookbooks. That was before internet, so I couldn't get online and look. So I'd go to the library and I'd check out books and I would look, and I was trying anything I could do to find out, well, how do you make a dumpling that's lighter? Well, obviously you need like some baking powder, baking soda, whatever in it, and or something, some flour or something to make it lighter, eggs, And ironically, I found a recipe that was from New England, from a New England cookbook that had these dumplings in it. And that was interesting to me. Hold on a minute, I'm having to wash these turnips. That was interesting to me because I had never associated cornmeal with the North, although it's very important culturally to them as well in the North. But anyway, this is a Southern dish using, I associate with Southern ingredients. So anyway, that's where I learned to make these dumplings. And that's what we're going to be making today is cornbread dumplings to go in here. So really, I'm just dicing up right now. I should move that so you can see it. I'm dicing up these turnips. You want a fairly consistent dice. And the thing that I like about this, making this meal, is it's fast for the most part. And it's just a one pot. You throw everything in there and you just turn it on and you cook it. Very, very simple. Makes cleanup easy. This is a great meal to make if your family eats vegetables and eats things like this for a crowd, because it's easy and it's very filling because of the ingredients in it. It's a really great fall dish to make. It's really warming. I love the flavors of it. It has flavors that remind me of like the New Year, because it has black-eyed peas and greens. And for us, we always, growing up, we would have usually collard greens. So this is turnips. It's a little bit different, but if you love the flavor of turnips, you're gonna love this dish. It's a vegetable, I think, that's underutilized. I associate it with the South, and I also associate it with European peasants. For some reason, I always picture people in like Cinderella or something like that having to eat turnip soup. So, anyway, I'm gonna set this over here, put that there, and get this going on the stove so that we can get some heat under it and get it cooking. We'll get a head start on that. While I'm cutting up these other things, let me get some water to go in here. Just starting it with a little bit of water just so it doesn't burn while we're going through this. I'll at least keep it from scorching. Those right there. Right here, we're going to get these stems off. Now, I know a lot of you probably like to take and strip the greens off of the stems. I think the stems are great cooked in it, so I just leave them in there. I just do a really coarse chop. As you can see, this has stems. It's got everything in there, but that's going to be fine. It's going to cook down. Tons of nutrients, tons of flavor. The largest part of those stems cut off. You can make this as refined or as rough as you want to. I'm making it kind of rustic. I mean, it is a rustic sort of stew. I realize too as I'm putting it in this giant pot, I'm making a big pot. Just tear those up. Making a really, really big pot of this. I didn't realize it was going to be so large, but that means we'll probably end up having some leftovers. So, probably only need about half a pack of these peas. I'm not giving you a recipe for this. I'm giving you a technique. Hopefully by sharing this technique with you, you'll learn to, throwing things all over. You'll learn to cook a few things. And I'm sure many of you already know how to cook a few things without a recipe. But this is more of a technique. I think if you make it a couple times, if you make a dish like this a couple times, you'll discover what you like about it, what sort of combinations, and you can change the type of beans you want to. It's really good. I've made it with field peas before. I've used the frozen black-eyed peas that I'm using here, but I've also used canned black-eyed peas, although I try not to use a ton of canned stuff, but I mean, I have used it. Sometimes you just got to cook what you have, or I've lived in places where you don't have access, so you kind of like cook what you can buy, because every area of the country doesn't necessarily have the same products. So, like I said, I'm using ham grenade or a picnic shoulder. It's a piece of smoked meat. It's going to give flavor and also the protein that we need to go in here. Get that off of there. This is a really, actually, pretty piece of meat. Boy. The nip that they have over it where they smoked it is really in there. Okay. I'll have to go in a different package. I won't put all this ham in there. I'm just gonna cut off a small section and we'll chop it up, and then I'll see where we get to. Put that in there. Once again, you can make this as small or as big as you like. This particular piece here has some fat on it. I'm not opposed to that. You might not like the fat, and if you don't, you cut it off. I think it renders out into the vegetables and it makes things taste better, so I use it. Skin seems a little tough. More piece. Once again, like I said, this isn't a recipe, so you just put in it what you like. It's a little fatty. Like I said, this fat, if you're like me, is what adds the flavor, but you can tell I like it because I'm fat myself, so. was a small piece. Let's do one more piece here. I think we're gonna have plenty. Okay. So that's all in the pot. We're almost done here. I have onions in here. What I'm gonna do is put a little onion powder on it. Once again, like I said, you need to taste this as you're going. Put some more water. I think we better put more. There we go. Add some later. And I'm going to put about a half a packet. I happen to have a half a pack right here of hand-flavored bouillon in here. Like I said, that's going to boost up a little ham flavor and give the broth a little bit more taste. You don't have to use that. That can really be eliminated if you need to. A little salt, a little pepper. And I think that's pretty much it for now. I'm gonna put the lid on this and let that just start cooking. This probably needs to cook for at least a half an hour. I'd say maybe check it after a half an hour. It may have to go a little longer than that. You just wanna make sure that your turnips are cooked. The ham basically is already, it's done, so you don't have to worry about that. But anyway, while that's cooking, we're gonna take a break and I'll come back. We're gonna make up some dumplings, get those in there, and it's gonna need to cook for another 20 minutes or so, and we'll be ready to eat. Okay guys, so now we're on to making the dumplings. These are proportions. This way you can make as many or as little as you'd like. So I'm gonna say roughly, if you're thinking about proportions, and you're looking at things using a cup as your largest measurement, which obviously you could do more than a cup and a half, whatever. 2 cups, however many people you wanted to make them for. I'm gonna start today with doing 1 cup. Actually, I'm gonna do 2 cups of cornmeal. Actually completed that bag, so that's good. So it's 2 cups of cornmeal, and I'm gonna do a third, roughly, a third to a half of self-rising flour. Now, the self-rising flour, if you can't get it, you can use regular. If you don't have it, you just use plain all-purpose flour. You're gonna need to add some baking powder into it, but I'm gonna put a half a cup of self-rising flour into the 2 cups of cornmeal, and that's roughly the proportions you want. If I were gonna put 1 cup, if I were making 1 cup, which is a significant amount of dumplings, I would put in 1/4 to a half cup of flour into that to make those. We're also gonna put in, to season these, I'm gonna put a significant amount, I'm gonna say a tablespoon of garlic powder, and then sage, rubbed sage. That's a flavor that I love with pork, and it's a flavor that I use in Southern food a lot. So I'm gonna say you're gonna put a teaspoon of sage in there to give those, so they'll have an onion and sage sort of taste inside of the dumpling. Now, we're not adding any fat or anything to this because there's already enough sort of like fat in the pot, considering that I put that ham in there and it had all that fat on that. So I'm not gonna add butter or milk or anything. It's just gonna be, it'll just be your cornmeal, flour, and your seasonings, how you want it. And you're gonna put in 1 egg. I could, if I wanted this a little eggier and lighter, I could add an additional egg to it. I'm gonna make these a little bit more on the dense side. They're not gonna fall apart, but because when you put them in the pot, you're not gonna stir them. You're just gonna put them into your pot, which I'll show you that part here in a few minutes. You're not gonna stir it. I'm gonna add some of the broth, hot broth, from the pot. So I have a cup of broth here that I've just gotten out of the pot over there, out of where my turnips and everything's been simmering. That's gonna go into this. You wanna be careful so that you don't scramble that egg, and you wanna be careful that you don't just cook it and set up that egg. You wanna make sure that it's gonna mix. Now I put the broth in here because I want the dumpling to have some flavor, and that flavor is already in the broth that we've made. So putting that broth into your dumpling mix just reinforces the flavor profile that you're going for, which is this fall stew flavor, sort of like turnipy, hammy sort of flavor. Now you want to be careful when you get to this point. It's okay if you can see I have a few turnips that were in there, turnip leaves. This is looking close. I want to be careful how much broth I add at this point, because I do want to make a dumpling, but I don't want it too stiff, and I don't want them so thin that they're going to disintegrate. Now, this cornmeal and flour absorbs a significant amount of liquid. So far as your broth is concerned, you're going to need to taste your broth in your turnips that you're cooking with your ham, and you're going to need to put additional broth in there, because when we go to make these dumplings, it's going to absorb some of that liquid. Now you can see this is a little wet, but that's how you want it at this stage, because that's going to sit there now, and that's going to start sort of like absorbing the liquid, and it's going to get thicker as it sits. So I'm through with that spoon. We're going to use a tablespoon to drop these in there, because we don't want big ones. They're going to swell up fairly large when we put them in the pot, which I'll show you that part. So let's change our camera here and show you the inside of this pot, and we're going to show you how we drop these. What your soup should be looking like at this point. You can see the turnip roots have cooked down, your beans have cooked down. I've just added some broth and I've tasted it for flavor, just to make sure that it was flavored the way I'd like. Next, I'm just going to take our cornmeal dumplings and I'm just going to drop them into the pot. Try to drop them separately so that they don't touch. You'll see that they immediately start to sort of like rise and cook up. Some will be bigger than other ones. This is really rustic, so I don't worry too much about having tails on some of them or having them all perfect. The key right now is to get these into your stock, and you want that much stock because, as I said, these are gonna swell up like cornbread. They're gonna rise. They have that self-rising flour in them, so they are going to rise in here. and make essentially a steamed dumpling. Actually, it'll be a boiled dumpling because they are being steamed, but they're actually boiled. Looks like I made about the right amount. This pot has enough food in it, I think, to feed the army. I made a mess and I'm trying to cook with one hand here while I'm holding the camera. So we're getting some creative cooking captured here. But as you can see, we've used all of that dumpling mixture. They're all in the pot. I'm going to put this lid on it. I had some water over here in case I needed to add more, but it doesn't seem like I need to. Anyway, there it is cooking. Just going to show you guys the reality of doing this. It's a mess. But anyway, that's going to keep cooking now, and we'll come back and see what it looks like when those are done. So let's see what the dumplings look like now that they've been cooking for a while. They're all fluffed up. Let's take a look here. Yep, they're done. I don't know if you can see that. So I'm going to serve up a bowl. So that's how you make this winter stew. I'm making myself a big bowl here to go sit down and eat. So hopefully you've enjoyed watching this and you will try this at home. It's really delicious. And come back and see me again and see what I'm cooking and see what's happening over here at Jamie's house.